Now, it's time for the Anchormen podcast with Matt Gaetz and Dan Ball.
Welcome back to the Anchorman Show. I'm Matt Gaetz, alongside my good friend and occasional colleague and coworker, Vish Burra. Vish, thanks as always for being here to discuss what's been going on this week, and we'll be joined a little bit later by another member of our team, Chris Cello. But before we get to that, we have seen the stock market undulate like it was the 80s again, okay? No longer is the slow ride up with the S&P 500 the ride you are on. We have seen big drops, big rises, and I kind of think it may be a new trend line for us that in an era of reset and reorganization, there are going to be some peaks and valleys. How do you think politically we should deal with an undulating stock market as maybe a new feature of American life?
Well, I think that we as Americans, we kind of live and die by those numbers every day because that's what gets pumped in our media every day. That's the message that we get every day. And, the thing we also have to remind ourselves is that, fear sells for a lot of these programs, right? And so when the stock market takes a dip, they use red everywhere to kind of show that we're going down, right? Something's wrong. But you know what? The story that I never heard, since 1995, the stock market, has been up 600 or 700% to date, right? And that is a story we never get. That we don't celebrate, when the stock market is up that 100%. You didn't hear any of those stories. 200%, 300%. There were no benchmark stories about, in the last 20 years the stock market's gone up 400%. And so we don't appreciate enough about where we are from where we're coming from. But the moment there's a valley on those lines and in those numbers, we start freaking out. And I think we just need to chill, right? As
cool.
Trump said, be cool. Okay, keep calm, carry on. Yeah, President Trump said, we're not rolling with the panicking, right? Like, stop panicking, right? And so we need to be chill. We need to understand that we have a great leader who also in his mind lives and dies by the stock market. So when that thing's going down, President Trump definitely has it in his mind, but he also knows where he's taking this country. And so we need to stop panicking about every dip and every valley that shows up in the stock market. If we were to look at that graph 5, 10, 20 years, we are in a peak that we've never seen before as a country in its history.
I think you learn a little from observing the core principles of the Trump organization. It's not a quick flip enterprise. It's a long hold enterprise.
Right.
They find great assets, they improve them, they hold them long term. And it's kind of a be cool approach to real estate investment.
Right.
And now you see Trump really trying to build an American economy that is long hold again. And I think we've suffered from the quarterly earnings obsession that has captivated the American economy. I think it gave us crises like Enron. I think that sometimes it doesn't lead to the type of enduring relationships with communities that you used to see in corporate America, building the company town, taking care of every band at the local high school when they want to go to the Rose Bowl. Now it's about how to get that quick flip, quarterly earning. And I think with this reset and reorientation of the global economy through these tariffs, you're going to get there. And I would caution some of our Trump-supporting friends to be so enamored with the good moments in the market that we replace that as or we make that the focus rather than what we're really trying to do. What's the prime directive? What are we trying to do? We're trying to make it where in America you can have an earner who can support a family.
Yes.
Full stop, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't know that juice in the quarterly earnings get you there alone. I think you have to get back to looking at America the way Trump looks at some of his own assets.
Well, when you talk about the long-term hold kind of mentality that the Trump organization operates on, how Trump is kind of seeing this thing. This is actually precisely what we've been lacking for the last 40, 50 years. China, the way China thinks in 100-year clips. Okay, they think about their plans.
We think in 8-second clips.
Well, I mean, yeah, we think in 8 seconds. Well, to be fair, we think in 4-year clips, 8-year clips, because that's
2 years to the midterm.
2 years to the, and then another thing. Steve Bannon always talks about this, and I think he's so on point. He talks about the MBA, the Masters of Business Administration degree, wasn't really introduced until the late 60s or 70s. And the idea that was introduced when the MBA was introduced is this radical idea of maximizing shareholder value. And this is where you get this idea of my next quarterly earning has to be more than the last one, right? Because I have to deliver value for my shareholders. But now I feel like we have all these MBA graduates. They're all spread out through corporate America. And now these people are held hostage to that very same idea, right, of maximizing shareholder value in quarters, right, or year over year, as opposed to thinking, well, what is the long-term goal of all this money that we're making, right, of all this profit that we're getting?
And we're not against profit, and we're not against wanting to maximize profit. But when you have a structure in place administered by the stock market and Wall Street that causes you to look in those quarterly windows, I actually think you can drain the economy out of long-term potential and durability, and you make yourself more vulnerable, like in the time of the pandemic when someone could make a little bit extra dividend for a shareholder by offshoring some IP to Ireland and some production to India. Next thing you know, you've got those countries acting in their best interests, and we are left holding the bag. And I don't know if these tariffs can break that system and that perspective, but I think that Trump's, it's almost a protectorate, of the American economy, and we'll see how it plays out. I want to talk about the messaging too, though, on this, Vish, because we've heard in some of our activist circles, folks not so thrilled about the way the tariff policies are being explained to that average unmotivated Republican blue-collar worker in Staten Island, right, that you've got to go get to the polls in the midterms to hold on to the Republican majority. How should people be talking about these tariffs?
Well, yeah, I think that because we get there, I think the complexities of the issue are not really breaking through to that low propensity working class voter right now.
What is breaking through right now?
Chaos. That's all they're seeing. They're seeing it's chaos. Prices are going up. My 401k is going down because so many of our 401ks, our pensions are, again, tied into the markets, right? Because that's where these portfolios are locked up, and that the prosperity of the market will mean prosperity for your pension, prosperity for your retirement. And so all they're seeing now is their numbers going down on their portfolios, the valleys in the market. And so they're seeing that. They're seeing the chaos. They're seeing that prices are going up. President Trump and a lot of our surrogates are saying, hey, yeah, prices are going to go up, short-term pain for long-term gain. But, what is that long-term? What are we talking about when we say long-term gain? And I think what we're missing is that we don't emphasize enough on the future because, and what do I mean by when I say future? This is for our children.
We got to dream a little. You want more grandiose rhetoric. You want more lofty oratory that tells you what America looks like at the end of this reset.
Well, there's not only that, but who's it for? Right? Again, emphasizing this is for our children. This is for our grandchildren. This is so that we can hey, it's very likely that we do see some kind of major conflict head to head with China. Do you want your kids, your grandkids to be in a position where we can't produce our own steel and they have to be in a head-to-head battle with China, right? I think that is to sell that we are fighting for position here in the future, right? In the future where it's gonna happen, right? The whole idea of Thucydides' trap and this rising power versus the declining power, right? And that we need to be able to make sure that we can turn around to our future generations and say, we left you in the best position possible versus that rising power that's China.
But that's a message of sacrifice.
Well, that's a message of sacrifice now, but this is the thing. It's for the people, and that's, again, going back to the idea of prosperity, 6, 7, 800% increases on the market for the last 30 years. Hey, you guys, it's been that 50% of the market of the population that has some sort of tie-ins to the market that has lived in that prosperity, right? And you guys have enjoyed that. All we're asking for is a smaller dip, not just for the country's prosperity, but for your kids' prosperity and for your grandkids' prosperity, right? And so that we can continue
what you just described is a call to national sacrifice.
I mean, hey, I think that
I don't know.
But it's not a national sacrifice. There is sacrifice involved, and all good things come with sacrifice, first of all. But I think the message needs to be that Donald Trump is reshaping the social contract for Americans for at least a few generations to come.
So give me a vision of what you think that social contract is prior to this tariff regime, and how you think it changes.
So prior to the tariff regime, Democrats, Republicans alike have basically tied the idea of prosperity to the stock market, to the GDP, and all of these things were
the United Markets of America.
Right, exactly. Treating the country as an economic zone.
That we're all either consumers or producers. We are interchangeable parts, the things that devalue culture and language and identity, and just say, oh, well, it's fine if a bunch of illegal immigrants come here to do jobs that you don't want to do, because all that really matters is keeping up the technocratic production side.
Right, and a bunch of zeros and ones that can be moved around and replaced to achieve maximum efficiency. By the way, if there was ever a more Marxist concept, to come across our way than that, I would like to know, because treating individual humans as units that can be moved around and placed in certain places to achieve maximum efficiency for the superstructure, the economy, that is a Marxist concept, right? That nothing matters except for the efficiency of the market that produces value.
Okay.
Right?
So I get that. And I actually get how pre the Great Liberation Day, that was the structure we were living in. And it's what had a lot of people frustrated, feeling like their future wasn't going to be any better. And it almost goes back to the line Trump gave at the 2016 convention. What have you got to lose?
Right.
And people felt that way. They voted for him. And now the new social construct can be what?
The new social contract now is that we are resetting the rules of global trade and using America's position as a hegemon to establish it, because we do not want a future where China is going to dictate the rules of that trade. And if if those rules are going to be detrimental to Americans, well, where is that going to push us in the future? Again, we might have to go and reset those terms, a little more forcefully. And if we can't produce our own medicine, if we can't produce
but that
our
doesn't
own
get to the
steel.
social contract, Vish.
So
what am I getting out of my participation in this American experience, and what am I giving to it?
So in exchange for not having the absolute dirt cheapest goods in the world coming from China and Vietnam and all these places, in exchange for that, you will have guaranteed a job that keeps up with the a job where the wages keep up with the market and productivity that you're actually outputting, and you're able to rely on your communities closer to you at home for all of the things that you need in your life, as opposed to hoping that someone in some foreign country has your best interest in mind, right? We want to bring not just commodities closer to home, but concern closer to home, right? That the people that are looking out for you are right here around you, and you can go and negotiate with them to keep your life
to a higher quality of life.
Yeah, to the higher quality of
and
life.
that's what I think I would distill it to. The pre-Liberation Day social contract was that if you produced, that the system would create the most efficiency out of that production. Mm-hmm. That's the promise. We've probably not lived up to that to the extent, but that was the core promise. Produce in an efficient capitalist system, more efficient than a socialist or Marxist system, will generate value out of that production. The problem is that value wasn't always realized by the working women and men of this country. Right. The value is some hedge fund operator who shorts agricultural foodstuffs, screws the farmers, and gets paid. The value is in somebody who offshores your plant to Chihuahua, Mexico. And sure, yes, high intelligence and aptitude created efficiency, but at the cost of quality of life. Yeah. And I think what Trump is saying is that actually the quality of life of Americans is what is core to this experience. And you can't have an affordability index that is out of whack on things like housing and food. And you look at features of the Trump agenda on dereg, all the incredible stuff that EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin, good friend of yours and mine, is doing to unlock the potential of our businesses. But at the end of the day, the businesses don't exist as an end unto themselves for benefit. It has to inure to the benefit of the country. I'm so excited when we get our Merriweather Farms shipments in. You get a beautiful piece of ribeye. Look at that marbling. Now, I take it out of the package, let it get down to room temperature. All I've got on here is a little salt, a little pepper, and then a little avocado oil. And then I've had my pan preheating with a little oil.
Head to merriweatherfarms.com and enter promo code MattG for 15% off your first order.
And I actually think it's working. I had a friend of mine in Washington, big Trump supporter, call me and say, "Well, Matt, should I be black-pilled, on one of the days of the doldrums of the market?" And I am just so for this because I think that throughout American history, we've had to make decisions about our market, and when we put that quality of life coefficient first, we do better. We covered on the show under President McKinley, under President Coolidge. I think you've got McKinley, Coolidge, and Trump as the Mount Rushmore of tariffs, and it may work out that way. Now, the thing we were talking about is whether or not it's being messaged correctly.
Yeah,
and I think we've got some good messengers on the point. Howard Lutnick has been making the rounds and doing an incredible job. His argument is that we have to be pitching that American robotics and American technology and American adoption of new enterprise will always be cheaper than cheap foreign labor. Mm. Is that the argument we should be making?
I think it's certainly part of the argument that should be making. This is actually also one of the kind of tenets that I've also kind of grappled with in trying to understand, how we justify automation and robotics also in the face of mass immigration. If you're telling me that there are all these AI is coming, robotics is coming, everything's going to be automated, and we're going to be able to do things all, cheaper without humans who take vacations and health insurance is needed for them and all this stuff. It's like, okay, so why do we need immigration again? Right? Why do we need
automation is the answer to illegal immigration.
Right.
I mean, when a robot can effectively pick strawberries, tomatoes, and oranges, you're going to see far less of a constituency for bringing people across our border illegally.
Well, that's right. And so but
what does it do? We've also seen the impact on the American worker, the big longshoremen strike.
I was just going to say,
yeah,
right?
Go ahead.
So the longshoreman thing was all about, well, you guys are going to automate all our jobs away. We can't have that, just willy-nilly without looking out for the longshoremen right here in America, who's gonna get out of a job.
We call it the longshoreman thing, but let's zoom out a little bit. This was the big strike that was diffused in a lot of ways, where the folks who are responsible for loading the cargo off of ships and then onto trucks to be distributed throughout the country were demanding a new contract. Mm-hmm. And in those contract negotiations, they wanted prohibitions against automation. Like usually in these contracts, the core thing is the pay raise, the benefits, the insurance, the pension, all that stuff. But here, it seemed the sticking point was similar to what you saw in the writer strikes in California, where people are demanding, human workers are demanding that there be contractual provisions that stop machines from taking their jobs. People might not want to hear this. I think that's a losing fight. I think when you are fighting against technology to that degree, it doesn't inure to your benefit. The people who are going to thrive are the ones who become the prompt engineers, who learn how to interface and augment robotics. And that is a space that people ought to be in if they don't want to be replaced. And I don't think any union contract is going to save you.
Well, that actually reminds me of there was a brilliant conversation between Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro, and Tucker Carlson said, "Hey, if self-driving trucks were invented overnight, and I think actually it was Ben Shapiro who says this, if self-driving trucks were invented overnight and 50% of the non-college educated men are truck drivers in this country, how would you respond to that issue?" Tucker said, without blinking an eye, Tucker says, "I would ban them. Overnight, I would ban self-driving trucks." And he said, and the reason he says is because the social cost of putting that many men out of work that quickly would be insurmountable. And so you need to, I think there needs to be an approach where we do this mindfully, right? That we have an issue, and especially with the tariffs, the stock markets, when we talk about it, it's all about profit without kind of thinking about a little bit of the process behind it, right? Or the purpose behind it, right?
The purpose is always efficiency and profit.
Right, but it's
the same.
This is what I'm saying. Profit and purpose need to be tied together, not the purpose just being profit.
This conversation could be happening at the Roots convention. Profit and purpose have to be tied together.
Well, yeah. I mean, hey, Steve Bannon even talks about a version of moral capitalism as well, right? The idea that there has to be some kind of thought that's put into why of why you make why are you pursuing profit? Why are you pursuing automation? If it's just for efficiency, it's very easy for me to say no. Right? Because I'm not thinking, I'm in that moment, that conversation has nothing to do with humans or the social cost, right? Until the social cost and the human cost is added to the calculation of the profit, I think your profit number is out of whack. It's actually not a real number, right? Until you factor in the human and social cost.
No question that the tariff infrastructure is built on the foundation of moral capitalism,
right?
Because it's central to how the average American is interfacing with the economy, getting a job, and then having a career. I mean, we now are in a world where just like the gig economy has taken over the concept of the corporate woman and the corporate man, and building a career. Who do you think out there has been the worst messenger on tariffs?
Oh, right now, I think, you know what? It's all our online surrogates, right? Okay. Who are kind of just like burn it all down, right?
The whole like Trump is crashing the market on purpose.
Yeah,
I hate that argument. That is so nonsense.
Yes, I think that the people who are pushing that line, I think it's a problem because at the end of the day, a lot of like boomers with portfolios in the stock market are our voters, right? And so when you turn around and say we're burning it all down, right? It's not about the money, it's about sending a message, right? That's not going to work with them, Well,
it's also not Trump's mentality.
Right.
Donald Trump is a builder.
Right.
He accumulates assets. He drives wealth. He makes other people richer. He wants you to have more, do more, be more, dress better,
right.
Be a better custodian of your own family's future. That is central to how Donald Trump thinks about everything. And so the notion that Donald Trump is out there trying to crash or burn or destroy is antithetical to his perspective and to his entire life's work.
Yeah, I think so too. And so
And by the way, that's when the left got in the worst trouble. When they decided they wanted to be the party of destruction and riots and burn down the poor immigrants' bodega because you're mad about white supremacy or whatever.
Right.
I think that when you bite that lure, you better be ready for it to rip hard.
Right. And so I think that and on the other side of that, I do understand the frustration, right? One of the better messengers is also, I think, Scott Bessent.
Totally. Let's get into that.
Right. And so, I think the most salient, when he breaks down who actually owns the stock market.
How many stocks do you own, Vish?
Zero.
Zero.
I have zero, no retirement, nothing.
So when Scott Bessent says, look, there's 50% of the country who doesn't have a 401k, who isn't invested in the market, who rents, who has debt, who has credit cards.
That's me.
Who's he describing?
That's me. He's totally talking about me.
Did he get you with that?
Oh, 100%. When he said that, I'm like, this guy understands me, right? This guy understands kind of what we're talking about. But also, when you talk about the rise in young people voting for Donald Trump, this is part of it, right? You remember, but back in 2020, World Economic Forum, you're going to own nothing and you're going to be happy. It's like, well, look, I do own nothing, but I'm definitely not happy about it. And I'm not happy about the prospect of me never owning anything, right? And so I would like to own something. I'd like to buy in to this market, to this system, to this country. Again, when the founders created this country, one of the stipulations was in order to be able to vote was that you had to own property, because you want someone who's a stakeholder in the system to be custodians of that system. When people who don't have a stake in the system are then have some kind of responsibility to it, in terms of voting, they're going to be like, well, I don't own anything in the stock market. What do I care if it goes up or down, right? And so what you don't want is someone who says, I don't own anything in that market, so I don't care. That's bad. What you want is someone who says, I don't own anything in the market, but I would like to, and I would like for someone to be a custodian of this nation who would help me get there. And I think that is a lot of young people today who want to get there. But if you can't look at them and say, well, the market is crashing right now, you made a bad decision. I was like, well, I don't own anything in it in the first place. So for me, it kind of doesn't matter at the moment. Right. But
all right. So if that Bessent message works for you, it sounds like that works for you maybe more than the Lutnick message, even though to me, Lutnick's message about the future of the cost of creation is that visionary call about the future that you say we need. So if they're doing it right, if the destruction cheerleaders are doing it wrong, how do we know in the coming weeks, whether or not this is going well? We're not going to look at the Dow or the S&P 500 as the sole metric. We've dispensed with that. I would posit that it's the bilateral deals. Maybe it's not the sexiest stuff or the most headline grabbing stuff. But when Trump inks a new deal with South Korea, Sri Lanka, Vietnam, some of these mid-market countries, you're going to have the durable ownership in that which is ours, along with the enhanced purchasing power we've been discussing.
Well, I actually think Donald Trump kind of already did it today, right? And the way that he did it was by showing that the tariffs are not about just slapping on tariffs on everybody just because everyone's been ripping us off. And so we're going to get back at you. Again, that's a destructive mentality, right? We're going to get back at you. We're going to slap tariffs on everybody who's done us wrong. That's not what he did. Today, he came out and said, I'm pausing 90 days on everybody who came to the table because it's not about you guys. And China, who is playing, tit for tat, I'm posting up on them.
Okay, so there's two theories of how that played out. One theory of the case is this was the plan all along. The plan all along was to throw out blanket tariffs, almost like when you go bird hunting, you kick in the brush, you kick up the birds, right? So he's going through the field, he's kicking the birds up, and as all of that happens, you get the batch that are heading back to the flock.
No.
that's all these countries now wanting to renegotiate. And then you have the one that goes away that you can knock out of the sky. And in China's case, the retaliatory posture they've taken seems to put them in a worse position, driving Asian countries into the economic bosom of the United States. So is that how we know it's going well from your perspective?
That is 100% how we know it's going well. And the other thing is, it's always been about China, right? Yes, all these other countries, right? They have terrible tariffs on our stuff, yeah. But it's always been about China because they are
about
ruthless.
India too.
Oh, 100% it's about India. I can't believe that we even have this kind of trade. I'm like thinking, what is it that India sells that we want? So
Pharmaceuticals.
Well, yeah, you know what? That is a huge. I can't believe we ceded that ground to them. It's maddening.
And we
actually,
did.
we did, and it's maddening. And they got into the production of the generics. That's right, the mass production of the generics. So that but it's really been about China, and I think that him posting up on China the way he did, by saying, listen, all these people came to the table. This was kind of the plan all along, let's assume, right? I'm pausing the tariffs on them until we renegotiate some bilaterals with them. Post up on China. I think there are people on the left who even love that.
They used to?
Well, no, I think they still do. They just can't admit it because it's Trump who's getting it done. Right. And so I think that they love that we are posting up on China, but that, they want to see that that's what it's about. And it's not about, just punishing everybody just because. So every bilateral deal that gets closed, I mean, Trump needs
that's
to
how
go.
you're checking off progress.
Yeah.
So if bilateral deals don't start getting done, bad sign.
Yes.
If you start to see, and it's not going to be in the A block, it's going to be stuff that's on the third or fourth page of the Financial Times.
Right.
But when you see that, we are making progress.
Right.
We're making progress when we're fighting for economic freedom. We're making progress when we're fighting for the freedom of somebody to participate in that great ownership society in the United States of America. And we are indeed making progress when we fight for medical freedom. RFK Jr. has called it out. Big Pharma and the government work together to suppress treatments like ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, and other important drugs. Why? Because if they admitted those treatments worked, they couldn't rush through the COVID vaccine. And let's be honest, Big Pharma wasn't about to let effective alternatives cut into their billion-dollar payday. They didn't just push the vax, they made sure Americans had no other options. Big Pharma wanted to be in charge of your health, not you. They wanted total control, and they used the government to get it. That's why I trust All Family Pharmacy. They provide ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, antibiotics, vitamins, and more. The very medications that others tried to keep out of your hands can be available without red tape and without corporate pressure. Just real options. And it's not just emergency meds. You can even get your everyday maintenance medications as well. Go to allfamilypharmacy.com/Matt. Use code MATT10 for 10% off. Don't wait. Be prepared. Take control of your health. So we've been talking about how on the right, we've been dealing with the dynamic of a reset in the global economy, the messaging points, the organizing points. But it was also interesting to us how the left was reacting. And we sent our very own ace producer, Chris Cella, out in the field so you don't have to go there to see what's it like with the energy and vibes on the left as they are doing all this craziness. Now, Chris, we saw these hands-off protests emerge all over the country, and you went to one in San Diego. Tell us what you found.
It was a leftist fever dream. You would think that, Trump is loading, homosexuals and trans individuals into paddy wagons based off of the way these people are reacting. Just outrage and, but...
Well, tell us where you went.
So I was on Saturday, I was at the hands-off protest. Hands off, I guess, finding waste, fraud, and abuse within our government. And then the anti-education protest on Tuesday, that was Linda McMahon.
Well, let's start with the hands-off one. All of your protests are hands-on, are they not, Vish?
Every single one.
Yes, all hands-on. But these are the hands-off ones. So do we have any clips, any interesting content you want to share?
Yes, absolutely. So there was a very low testosterone male who attacked Moms for Liberty for trying to ban certain books. We have that clip.
Banning books from I wasn't aware of that.
That's an effort by Moms for Liberty. They go and they're trying to get books that they don't like, other populations that they don't like, and they'll go and they just ban a whole bunch. They put forth that these books should be banned.
So what stood out about this to you?
So this gentleman is calling out Moms for Liberty for trying to quote unquote ban books that show graphic images of children doing very sexualized things. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that, but I think this guy was definitely a paid protester based off the fact that he had sunglasses and a mask on. You could not see his face, and he did have the talking points down pretty well.
What percentage, Chris, of the people out here are masked at these things you've been going to?
I would say at least like 40%.
No.
Yes.
I was going to guess like maybe 1 in 5. Like walking around the country, what do you say? Like maybe 1 in every 10, 15 people might be wearing a mask. That might even be high.
Today?
Yeah.
Oh, that's way too high. 1 in 10 or 20, 5%. Think about that. No
right.
way.
It's less.
No, it's way less now.
But 40 at one of these protests.
But 40 at one of these protests. Now we're into something's up. There's something's up. And I think Chella's maybe onto that a little bit. That those are the paid guys.
They dodging the facial recognition, or what?
Out of 40 people, there were I would say probably 15 at least, masked up, sunglasses, bandana over their face, to try to conceal their identities. No other reason.
Well, it's interesting because that guy had one of those the COVID masks, right? If you remember, before COVID, those protests, anything like that, it was all black bloc, right? These guys were all blacked up, black mask, black everything. After COVID, it's a lot of these people in medical masks, and I think it's an optics play, right? Because if you see a bunch of people in black bloc outfits protesting, you might have a negative sense, in your heart or in your mind.
You're
might
saying
have a
there's
negative
something that
sense.
says "I care about you" in a medical mask?
Well, no, it's more like I'm a victim, right? I'm hurt. I could get hurt if I catch something.
I'm just trying to.
I'm just trying to protect myself. It's more sympathetic.
All right. You got another clip from the event. Set it up for us.
So this gentleman believes that this is the start of a revolution.
I believe the revolution will be amplified, and the reason why I'm here is to help provide amplification. When you say revolution, what do you mean revolution? What I mean is there needs to be a complete restructuring of what's happening right now, and a revolution is the only way